I call this Sebastian Budget Review Advisory Committee to order. It's 6 p.m. on March the 4th, 2024. Let's start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. All please stand. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's have a roll call, please.
Okay. Larry Napier?
Who?
You.
Present.
Is it on? Can you hear me? Bruce Hoffman?
Here. Present. Whatever.
Harry Hall?
Here.
Terry McGinn?
Here.
Bill Middleton?
Here.
Amber Serta? Dave Newhall? Grace Reed?
Present.
Now, Dave, I think we have an excused absence with Dave,
Yes,
right?
I got notified by Dave by email, and if you remember, Amber had announced at the last meeting that she would be absent.
Did Amber call in too?
No, like I say, she had said at the last meeting that she wouldn't be making this meeting.
Oh.
So.
But
So
I'm present.
those are excused absences then?
But I'm present.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So, Grace, you will get a vote tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Your vote will count tonight.
Yep.
Okay. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from the February 12th meeting? And if so, I will entertain a motion to...
I have a question.
yeah.
Or I've got a couple of things, actually. It seems like there's a couple of things, or at least one thing that was kind of omitted, and then one that's a little bit inaccurate. On page 2 in section 5 on the selection of the chairperson, Mr. Hoffman did indeed make a motion to nominate Mr. Napier, and it was seconded. But it says there was no further nominations. I believe Mr. McGinn questioned whether or not there could be more nominations, because it should have been nominations and not a motion. And Mr. Napier said no more nominations, that we had to vote on that motion, and if that failed, then we could entertain more nominations.
But it was a motion.
I know it. It should not have been a motion for nominations.
Well, you can't change what happened.
I understand that, but it needs to be in the minutes. I am wanting to have that in the minutes, not change anything, not add anything, not take away anything.
Well, you're changing the minutes. He made a motion, and there was a second of
he
the
did,
motion,
but it
and
said-
there's a
and it-
motion on the floor, and you can entertain another...
What transpired was, Terry, please.
One at a time, please.
What transpired was, it says there were no motions, but it wasn't because there were no more motions. It was because no more nominations. It was because no more nominations were allowed, because the process, in my opinion, was incorrect. But anyway, that's what happened, and I think that should be in the minutes
Well, you're entitled
somewhere.
to your opinion, but when there's a motion on the floor, when there's a motion on the table and it's duly seconded, there has to be a vote on that motion.
I understand that. And I also
Apparently you
believe...
don't.
No, I do, and as the chair, you should have said we are taking nominations, not motions. And I'm sorry, Terry, please. And I'm sorry
Well,
if you
when a
think that
member
that's
on this
my...
committee makes a motion, it has to be honored. Okay?
That's fine. And then on number 6, where it says for the selection of the vice chairman, that Mr. McGinn made a motion to nominate, he did not make a motion. He just said, I nominate Amber Serta. It was not done as a motion. And so it was just a process. It was the way the process was completed, and I just wanted to have that put into the meetings, into the meeting minutes, because with the way the minutes are, it says that there were no further nominations, and I had just wondered about that, so.
Are you saying that wasn't a motion?
No, I am not saying it was not a motion. He clearly said motion, and it was seconded. But Mr. McGinn said, are we not going to take any more nominations for the chairperson?
Yeah, and I said there's a motion on the floor.
And you said that before we can take any more nominations, we had to vote on his motion.
On the motion.
Where I think the motion should have been rescinded, and the second rescinded, and it
Well,
gone to
you're entitled to your
nominations.
opinion, even if it's wrong.
You have the minutes?
Okay.
She's not wrong, though. She's correct. Proper rules of order.
Rules of order should have been like that.
Nominations,
Okay.
all nominations,
If I can interject.
before a motion is made.
Well, that's not what the agenda says.
Can I interject?
And
That's
the
what I'm-
member made a motion.
Excuse me, Chairperson, if I can, I'll help clear this up for you so we can move on. It's part of the reason why I'm here tonight. I was going to wait until later on, but since it's come up now, the minutes should not be a narration of people's opinions. It should be a straight statement of what happened. Any motions that were made, whether they were seconded or not, should be in here. If it's not accurate, we'll review it and fix it, because there was a motion made that there should be amendments. So, that being said, we'll get into a discussion later tonight. I was going to wait until after the budget stuff, but you guys want to have the training now, we can. It's up to you. Ken, how long is the budget stuff?
It's no problem for me, if you want to switch or move
Madam
move
City
the city
Attorney.
attorney up on the
It
agenda.
wasn't that I
would be fine.
wanted to change anything. I just wanted it reflected in the meetings, in the minutes, that there was further discussion other than what there was. It wasn't that I wanted to change anything.
Okay. Yeah, well, I was just listening upstairs, and I was going to wait until the budget stuff was
Well, we
done,
can
but
wait
then I
until after
noticed
the
y'all
budget
were
stuff. That's fine.
starting to go into this. So we'll make sure that it accurately, I watched the meeting, the last month's meeting, and there was a call for nominations, correct? And then there was a second made after there was one nomination. There was additional discussion as to whether there would be other nominations made. That's what I heard in the minutes. Does anybody disagree with that? Just state what you said.
I attempted to nominate a second person, and when you make a motion instead of nominating, if you watch any of the city council meetings
Correct.
and Robert's Rules of Order, basically.
Right, but we're not gonna discuss like what the proper procedure was at this point. We're
Right.
just gonna say whether or not the minutes are accurate. And if the minutes are inaccurate, then we'll state that they're inaccurate and we'll get them fixed. Later on, we'll talk about what the proper procedure should be so that going forward, y'all won't have problems like this. Okay? So then that being said, is there changes that need to be made to the minutes?
Well, we clearly had motions made. There was a motion made,
Correct.
okay? And on the agenda, it says selection of a chairperson. It doesn't say the whole nomination, it just says selection of a chairperson. That's what's on the agenda. We do not make this agenda up, but I have to follow this agenda. And when somebody makes a motion to select a chairperson and it's duly seconded, I have to call for a vote on that.
Respectfully, sir, nominations, and I'll prefer to talk about that later on. These minutes should just talk about what happened, and does it accurately reflect what happened? Does anybody disagree that this accurately reflects what happened at the beginning of the meeting? Is the
I think the
question.
minutes accurately reflect what happened.
I think it accurately reflects what happened, but didn't mention the fact that Mr. McGinn did.
Okay, so then
Say
it
something.
needs to be, so you all agree that they need to be amended to add the additional?
Conversation.
Correct. Does
Yes.
anybody disagree with that?
Yeah, I disagree with it.
You disagree that he made statements calling for other
I
nominations?
don't disagree with that, but I don't think that should be reflected in the minutes because in my opinion, it was out of order because there was a motion on the floor and it was duly seconded and then it's got to be voted on.
Okay, well, so then.
Correct or incorrect?
If you could, sir, at this time, call for a motion or restate the motion as to the minutes, and then you all can vote as to whether to amend the minutes.
I didn't follow what you just said.
So I may have missed it when I came downstairs. Was there a motion made to accept the minutes as is?
Not yet.
Okay. All right. So at this point, it would be appropriate for you to call a motion as to whether to approve these minutes as is or whether you want to change them. So you don't think they should be changed. Other people do. So at this point, call a motion.
Yeah, I think the minutes are accurate the way they're stated, because that's exactly what happened at the meeting.
So then it would be appropriate for you to call for a motion if somebody wants to approve them or approve them with changes and go from there.
I'll make an motion to approve them with changes.
But she just said she didn't want to change anything.
I said I didn't want to change what we did. I said I wanted to change the wording to add where Mr. McGinn had wanted to make additional nominations. And it was stated to move forward with the motion.
But what he was trying to do was out of order.
But at this point, we're not talking about what's out of order or what's in order. All we need is a simple motion as to whether accept these with or without changes.
And I'm making a motion to approve with changes.
I don't know what the rest of the committee think about that.
That's why you call for a vote. They'll let you know in the vote.
Yeah, well,
You've got a motion and a second.
now what was your motion?
My motion is to approve the minutes with changes. And the change would be to include wording that Mr. McGinn questioned for additional nominations, and it was decided to move forward with the motion.
Okay, the motion and a second. Let's have a roll call on this, please. Now, this motion is
Wait,
to
question.
add
Do
something.
you want to add also the change that you were talking about?
Oh, I'm sorry. And an additional change for number 6 to remove the word, to remove made a motion and make it say made a nomination for Amber Serta. There was no nominate,
What do you
motion
want
there.
to change there? Are you saying Mr. McGinn didn't make a motion?
He didn't, he said, I would like to nominate Amber Serta. That's all he said.
Do you second that also?
Yes.
So what do you want to do there?
It should read, Mr. McGinn made a nomination for Amber Serta for vice chairman.
Well, I don't know. I didn't listen to the things. Was it a motion or was it not a motion for Amber Serta?
The answer is there was a motion after I made the nomination. In fact, the motion was, we all agreed. It was, everybody said, yes, we agreed. But I made a nomination.
You didn't make a motion.
No, because you're not supposed to. No, I did not. I made a nomination.
Well, I don't know why you say we're not supposed to. Where's that on the agenda that we have to do nominations? It says select the chairman and a vice chairman.
We discussed
Okay,
that later.
I'm sorry. We're getting in the weeds. We need to just, is that the change that you
Yes,
made the motion to change the minutes in the second?
the change was I made the nomination.
Okay. So those are the recommended changes.
Right.
So then you're saying this whole thing is wrong. You're saying you didn't make a motion at all.
The motion got made after that.
The change would be to
Wait a
strike,
minute.
made a motion to nominate and change it to nominated. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay, so that's clarified.
Was there a motion made for Amber Serta or not?
Sir, what the
I didn't listen to the meeting.
Okay.
I
The recommendation to the change based on the motion is to strike that language and change it to nominated.
Well, I'm still trying to determine whether, you're saying you didn't make a motion, you just made a nomination.
Yes, and we're supposed to be voting on whether we make the change or not.
Correct.
So you're saying number 6 here, the selection of vice chairperson, is all wrong. It wasn't a motion at all, it was just a nomination.
We're saying that the language should be changed from made a motion to nominate and replaced with the word nominated in the minutes.
Well, if you didn't make the motion, who did?
Sir, it's not about, he's not saying that Mr. McGinn part is wrong. He's saying that strike made a motion to nominate and replace it with the word nominated.
So you're trying to change number 6 in the minutes here totally.
Sir, it's not, I'm not. I'm just telling you restating what the motion is in the second. You can call it for a vote, and if they agree, they'll agree, and if they disagree, they'll disagree. And you'll have a vote as well.
Well, I haven't listened to the tape, and I mean, I don't remember, but you say you didn't make a motion, you just made a nomination.
This is what the motion, it's not, that's what he's saying, is that it should be changed, she and he, based on the motion, is that wording should be changed. There's a motion on the floor and a second to change that.
Madam Attorney?
Yes, sir.
Isn't there normally a discussion by the body after the two motion and before the vote in Robert's rules? In other words, if there's a motion and the second, there's a discussion.
Generally, yes, but we're here to talk about, are you talking about the motion at hand? Okay, if we're talking about the motion at hand, yes, at this point, you can call for discussion amongst your board and then vote on it.
Yeah, about number 6 here.
Correct, but it's technically, you're only supposed to be getting into whether or not that's what happened. Not as
Well,
where
he
you
says
disagree.
he didn't make a motion.
Sir,
He
when-
said he made a nomination, and then somebody else made a motion, is what I heard him say.
The motion and the second includes 6, but it also includes adding wording that Mr. McGinn also wanted to make another nomination. So there's 2 changes to the agenda,
Right,
or not to the agenda, I'm sorry, to the minutes.
to the minutes, right. But I think the main discussion was that part on number 6, right? But there was 2 parts.
Well, see, I disagree with that. It's out of order. Because when somebody makes a motion and it's seconded, that's the end of it. You have to vote on it. The discussion is over. When there's a motion on the floor and a second, that's it.
Okay,
You have to vote on that motion.
there's a motion
have-
on the floor and a second then. We
Unless-
have to vote on that. That's what she's saying. We need to vote on it now, on that motion and
Yeah,
that
I'm
second.
talking about what we did at the meeting though, and if we change this, then that's not gonna be what happened.
Well, that's why you take the vote. If everyone on the board agrees that their motion is what actually happened, then the vote will pass. If they don't agree, then it won't pass.
I'm not sure we're talking about the same thing.
On number 5,
Yeah, on
I
number
want to
5.
include
I understand
that
on number
Mr.
6,
McGinn-
he's
Let's make
saying
this
that he
clear.
did
All
not
right,
make a
let's
motion,
start
he
over.
just made a
Let's start
nomination.
over. Who made the second to pass the minutes? Do you want to withdraw that so it can be restated? Are you amenable to it?
withdraw your second.
I am, if you do have to be, yes, if you have to restate it, I'll withdraw the second. But I think under the rules, once we make this motion on the minutes and second it, then it's open for discussion, and then we vote.
Right, unless the board, if you all, the people who made the motion decide to withdraw their motion and their second.
Then what happens after that?
He's open to new motions.
So
No,
the
I don't-
motion
I
on the
don't-
floor is to,
Yes, I
Add
do
stuff
not withdraw.
Okay.
to these minutes.
So then you have discussion if you want to. You have attorney questions if you want to, and then you call the vote.
Exactly. That's-
And it passes or fails. And if it fails, then you can
well,
call
could you
other
please
motions.
restate your motion?
Okay,
Precisely.
for number 5, I am asking that we merely add verbiage. I'm not asking that we change what happened. What happened, happened. I want to add verbiage that Mr. McGinn asked to add additional nominations, and you said that could not be done until the motion was voted on. For number 6, it says that Mr. McGinn made a motion to nominate Amber. Mr. McGinn nominated Amber. He said, I nominate Amber Serta for vice chairman. And someone agreed. And then we all said,
Well, that's clearly
aye.
different than a motion.
Yes, that's what happened. And that's why the minutes should say he
But
made
what were
a
you talking about,
nomination.
a motion after the fact? Who made a motion after the
We're
fact?
just restating the motion at this point, sir.
Yeah.
Respectfully.
I second what,
Motion
the
should not be in number 6. It was all nomination.
Only on number 6.
Yes, only on number 6. Number 5 stays as it is, just adds that Mr. McGinn questioned about adding another nominee or another nomination.
Yeah, before I could agree to that, I'd have to go back and listen to the meeting, because I don't know. The minutes say it had a motion, there was a motion. I don't.
Well, I can state in my place my recollection of it if you get to that point, but, so is that the final motion?
yeah.
We need to take a vote.
Second, and the second, did you have a second, sir?
What's that?
Do you have a second on her restated motion?
I seconded it.
Yeah, he seconded it. But
Okay.
I'm still not sure what we're trying to change.
So as I understand it, the change
She's
is...
wanting to change number 6 altogether.
Number 5, the change is to add language that Mr. McGinn wanted to add nominations and...
Well, number 5 is not a change, it's just an addition.
Right, it's an addition, but it's a change.
But they're wanting to change number 6.
And number 6, they want to change the language from made a motion to nominate to the word nominated. That's my understanding.
Harry, did you second a motion, or?
I seconded
No,
it.
Harry. I'm talking to Harry Hall. Harry is the one that made the second.
I thought there was a motion, but, so I seconded it. But I'm okay with the verbiage, taking those 2 words out and going on.
And then adding that stuff in on number 5? That's, I don't know. I guess it's up to the committee. So we've had, there's a motion and a second on the floor. Let's have a roll call vote on the motion. Does everybody understand the motion?
Yes.
Chairman Napier,
Who?
You.
Is it Napier?
I
Napier?
vote no.
am I saying your name correctly?
Is it Napier or Napier? How do you pronounce your last name, sir? I'm sorry.
What's that?
How do you pronounce your last name? Is it Napier or
Napier.
Napier.
Napier? You're asking for a roll call?
His vote is no.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we need a roll call on that.
Mr. Middleton? Yes. Mr. Hoffman?
Yes,
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. McGinn?
Yes,
Ms. Reed?
Yes.
Chairman Napier?
Napier.
So the vote on that's 5-1.
All right, now I'm going to let Ken do his budget stuff, and then I'll come back up.
See, when these agendas are made up, instead of saying selection of a chairperson, why don't they say call for nominations? Because it says selection of a chairperson, and somebody on this committee makes a motion, and it's
Yes, sir.
seconded, I have no choice but to
Let's discuss that
call
when
for
I
a
get
vote.
back to my item. Let Ken do his
And
budget.
anything else along the thing for a chairman is out of order until that vote is taken. Is that not correct?
We'll discuss that in a bit. Right now, we've already done the minutes. Now we're going to go into the budget items, and when we get back to me, I'll talk more about that.
So now I will accept the motion to approve the minutes as amended.
we just did.
We just did.
That's what we just
Yeah,
did.
you just voted to change it. You didn't vote to accept the minutes.
The motion was to accept them with those changes.
Oh, okay. Well, I voted no on it, so it's 5-1. Review of the 23 fourth quarter budget report, and I assume we don't have it, so did I not read your email right? Do you have that finished?
The fourth quarter report is in your packet, yes.
Oh, okay. Well, then you're on, Cam.
Okay. So as we normally do, we present to the City Council a resolution to amend the budget for any changes that were made during the quarter. So this is for the quarter ending September 30th, 2023. And I've drafted the agenda that will be submitted for the March 20th City Council meeting. So in the agenda item, I've explained some of the uses of the R&R fund and the general reserves. Attached a proposed resolution for their for the City Council's adoption, with an exhibit showing the budget changes in detail, with explanation of what they were, and those that are authorized to be approved by the city manager, some that were already submitted to the City Council and approved, as well as there were about 4 adjustments that were uses of the R&R account. So these are being brought for your information because the city manager had the authority to make those adjustments. So as we normally do, I presented a summary of the general fund showing the revenue collections and the expenditures. The revenues were 106.8% greater than budgeted. So we had a very robust year in terms of comparison of revenues to budget. Most of that was in the electric franchise and utility tax receipts. They far exceeded my my budget projections. We had some other unanticipated revenues, including code fines, interest earnings, collection from FEMA, and an entry that we required under a governmental standards requirement to show $87,000 of deferred rent revenues. It's not cash, it's coming, in other words, but the pronouncement by the Government Finance Officers Association, or the Government Accounting Standards Board requires us to make these entries now. So it's not cash in hand, it's not available until the future year. But we're required to make that and post it to the revenue account. But all in all, we did end up with a substantially higher amount of reserves in general fund. I showed the breakdown of the general fund reserve balance as well as the R&R fund, R&R account balance, and you can see on the very first page at the very bottom that we have some almost $8.5 million in reserves at the end of the year. I wouldn't get too...
Can I ask a question, or should I wait till you're through?
I don't mind.
You don't mind? Okay. Is that those funds unencumbered? Are all those funds, the $8 million, is that all unencumbered?
Those would be unencumbered funds, yes.
And that would leave over $3 million towards your hope to set up the in-house insurance?
That did not work out.
Okay.
So we changed it before the final budget adoption, actually. I backed out of that expectation because it wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't able to, under the state statutes, there was no way to do that.
Okay.
So we ended up just changing that to, we budgeted in this year only the premium needed for the dock insurance. We continued. So, I was gonna say, don't get too enthusiastic about all these reserves that we have. We've got a big year coming up. There's a lot of commitments that have already been built into next year's budget. I expect the revenue levels will stay the same. We recognized last year, and like the electric franchise and utility taxes, we recognized that they were coming in above last year's budget. But in terms of being conservative in this year's projection, I recall being a little bit more conservative on the budget amount and not count on what we were receiving last year to happen again this year. But in fact, it did happen even better than I expected. So, just a word of caution, but the American Rescue Plan Act, we've got quite a bit of funding there, and just a reminder that that act requires us to commit these funds before December of 2024. Some of these projects take a long time getting in place with permitting and expected grant matching funds and et cetera. So you might want to expect in the coming months that we might reallocate some of these funds to some projects that will get completed by then, or at least committed by then to be in compliance with the act. Do you want me to pause and answer any questions in regards to the general fund or the American Rescue Plan?
Is that on or off? I don't know, the red light confuses.
I think the red light's on.
The
Red light is on. Isn't
red
that
light's on.
interesting? Usually it's green, means you can go. Yeah. Okay. Ken, just to clarify, the $500,000 was nothing more than us totally underestimating how much revenue would come in. Wow, that's a significant number.
Well, I think what happened, there were some rate increases in the previous year, and that produced revenues quicker than I anticipated.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
And we had the summer months that were probably, at the end of the year, they probably inflated those numbers somewhat. But the bottom line is I just didn't quite want to count on that continuing.
The 72,000 for FEMA, that isn't their overpayment, is it?
Their only payment?
The overpayment that we were holding.
Oh, no.
This is...
Interesting you brought that up. We still have on our books about $80,000 that was paid by FEMA for a project that we didn't submit for.
Right.
And I do have that in a liability account. So all these numbers
still sitting there.
All these numbers assume that we would pay them, and it wouldn't affect our balances.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. On the next page, I give a presentation of the stormwater fund. You can see that the ending balance there also exceeded our expectations. Part of that is unfinished projects. So as we normally do, these would be re-encumbered in the current year. You know, if the project was set up, we said we're going to spend it, but it didn't happen before the end of the year. Those projections are in a capital project fund, and they still are out there, so they would still be subject to pulling down part of these balances. But still, we did within expectations as far as the expenditures. In fact, we had some vacancies during the year that gave us some latitude there. On the enterprise fund, we had the golf course also exceeded our expectations on their fund balance. As you know, the revenues have been very good the last year and continue actually in this year. Airport Fund, we exceeded our expected, projected ending resources. And Building Fund just fell a little bit short of expectations, but they are also in good financial condition. So I don't normally go into a lot of detail on the balance of the report. I've given you a breakdown of the account summaries for all the funds, as well as the capital projects listing and a summary of where we have our monies invested. There's been no
Oh,
change.
by the way, kudos on the improved capital projects report presentation.
Okay.
That's,
It
it's
is-
much easier to read and understand.
Okay. Our capital projects are getting a lot of attention from staff. We're trying to focus on those that are, on the allocated funds to make those happen without undue delays. But so you have the accomplishments that were reported by all the departments as well as part of the report. And this is the fourth quarter, the quarter ending September 30th of 2023. Originally, I had scheduled this meeting to go over the first quarter. My time has not permitted me to complete the first quarter report. We don't have another meeting until, I believe it's May.
It's May.
May.
So probably what I will do, if it's agreeable to the board, I will prepare the report, send it out by email, and not necessarily have a meeting, but you would have the information preliminary to having the third quarter report, which is probably, I think, at the end of May anyway. So I could also put it on the agenda for that future meeting, but, at that point, it's kind of old news. And being the first quarter of the year, you're not going to miss a lot as far as any kind of critical trends to notice or to pick up on that might change our direction and how we're allocating money. So that would be my plan or my intention, unless you'll have other thoughts. And other than that, I'd be glad to take questions.
Ken, I don't have any questions on any of the numbers or anything like that. I'm all good with that. I was just looking at a couple of things. On the second page of the transmittal form, where it has the attesting signatures for the mayor, it has Fred Jones listed. Somebody's going to have to update that before Ed signs it.
Oh,
And
correct.
then,
Thank you.
also, back in the packet for the Q4 accomplishments, it says it's through Paul Carlisle, city manager. Was he already gone then? I think he was, wasn't he? Yeah.
My mistake
I
as
just
well,
happened
yes.
to, I just happened to notice those when I was proofreading it.
Good catch, thank you.
Okay. And that's all I had. I do have one question. On the summary of the changes, on the very last line, it talks about the centennial donations and stuff. So this is more or less for the keyboard warriors out there on social media that I don't ever intend to respond to, but a lot of people are saying, where do they get the money for this and where are they getting the money for that? So as people want to be sponsors for the centennial, that's when they pay their sponsorship money, it goes into donations and stuff like that, and then as it's used, it's moved into the centennial expenses, and that's all in general fund?
Yes, it's all accounted for in general fund. You're correct. As they donate, it goes into a donation revenue account. And then we have the expense side, of course. I can tell you that they, as of last week, they were pretty much had broke even with what had been collected to date. So we are anticipating or hoping for additional donations for the
Right.
future costs that are
There's a
coming.
lot of people out there that seem to think that money's just coming out of thin air. It's just unbelievable, some of the things that are being said. It's just, so I was just hoping that maybe some of them are actually tuning in.
There are any other questions or comments about the fourth quarter of '23 report? Anybody? Harry?
Yeah, just on on the fund balance, you said don't get excited about the level of the fund balance. And did I hear you say that you had other projects or grants or whatever that you had, you might be using some of that funds towards the matching portions or?
Having a healthy fund balance allows you to either pay cash for equipment or, match a grant, or, I mean, you can use it for those one-time type expenditures.
Okay, the reason I ask is I will be coming back from overseas on the 13th for the next meeting, so I'll miss that. So I figured I better ask it while you're still here. So you probably have some items, because you're looking to set up the new budget for the coming year, that some of these could be used to the city's advantage to make use of. And I just wanted to make sure that that's what I was hearing.
Well, if y'all recall, in the budget document, I present the financial policies, and one of those policies addresses fund balance. We've always stuck with a $5 million magic number.
Right.
That we would want to have just in case there's a hurricane comes through. We don't get reimbursements for 6 months to 3 years, however long it takes. So the $5 million is kind of a standard for us. And we started adding over the last few years some kind of reserve. I believe we're up to $390,000 in case of employees retiring and drawing their accrued benefits.
Right.
We also look at of course, the R&R fund. If every year we spend the whole $275,000 we're allocated, then we have to replace that 275 before the next year. So, I mean, the $5 million shouldn't be a standard. It should be probably closer to $6 million.
Okay.
To cover those kind of occurrences, make sure we don't dip into the $5 million for something other than just having that as our safety net. Thanks.
Harry? If I could add to that, during the last 2 city council meetings, there was also an opportunity for grants that came at the last minute for Riverview Park upgrades. And you needed to have matching funds that were not planned for in advance, and I would give that as one example. And it's a pretty good sized number.
Well, that's fine. I mean, I'm all for, if we have the funds available to move forward on things that we need. Matching grants, paying cash, foregoing all the interest and all that otherwise. And like I said, I won't be here for the next meeting, so I didn't know if you had a wish list, so to speak, of things that this could help out the city by putting toward.
We just, actually last week, I just sent out the forms for the department heads to fill out for their capital improvement program. I haven't gotten any results yet. That'll be like probably about 2 or 3 weeks from now. So looking at those capital costs, if some of these special revenue funds can't be applied to buying some of the capital or matching grants or You know, if they can't be programmed or are not sufficient to be programmed for everything that's expected, using one-time reserves, surpluses might be our safety net to still continue progress, get things done, get things accomplished, capital needs met, and so forth. So, you know, the standard is, you know, you don't spend more than you're taking in as far as your operating costs. But when it's capital items or paying down on debt, then those are like uses of one-time sources that are.
But when you see a number like that, if we have needs that would benefit the city, it'd help waylay some of the citizens that might be saying, why aren't we doing a tax cut? So that was one of the major reasons I was asking, do we have the needs for it?
Yes.
Which I'm sure we probably do, but,
I mean, ideally, you would cover your operating expenses with your normal operating revenues, just like your paycheck or your retirement check needs to cover how much you're putting out every month. So, but it's even better if you can also afford to replace that refrigerator or buy a new car or whatever and not eat into your savings account.
I agree. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Well, I think all in all, it was a pretty good report because we got more revenue than we got expenses. But your policy calls for $5 million in the fund balance, and you got $9 million, right?
Well,
and that $9 million is unencumbered fund balance.
The $5 million is
that's policy.
Well, for emergency type situations, but then we also try to cover something for anticipated payouts of leave for longtime employees.
Oh, I thought it was just a policy for how much your fund balance should be.
That would be on top of that, and any use of the R&R eats into that $5 million if you don't have some provision for that as well.
Well, the point is the city's in a healthy position.
True.
Okay. No other questions. We'll move on to the next one. Committee training. City attorney.
Here we go. Okay. So first things first, parliamentary procedure. I gave you all some homework. Sorry I didn't get it to you a lot in advance. I asked Ken to put me on the next meeting agenda. It happened to be in a couple of days. So, as you all know, we use Robert Rules of Order for our parliamentary procedure guidance generally. These are pretty basic. All of you have been volunteers probably for a while. You know the basics. We have an agenda. The one thing to note about Robert's Rules, it's a guideline. We have to follow it, but if something goes awry, it's not illegal. So it's not something that somebody could challenge us legally on. We like to have a clear agenda in advance. There's different methodologies to doing that. As we know, in your last agenda, you had selection of a chairperson. These topics are not legally binding. Just because it says selection of a chairperson versus nomination of a chairperson, it's just semantics. There's nothing wrong with it because of the way it was written. When she does the minutes, they don't have to be verbatim. All they have to do is reflect what accurately happened. That's why it's put before you. Some of the other things, basic parliamentary procedure. It's good for you to prepare ahead of time, obviously, read what's in the packet. And then we have talking about electing a chairperson. So let's get into that.
Jennifer, can I ask, if we have any questions while you're making the presentation, do we save them for the end or?
I'd rather you wait. That way you might get cleared up during my discussion.
Okay.
Thank you, if you don't mind. So just to clear it up, electing a chairperson, per Robert's rules, what you do is you call for nominations. You're not calling for motions, you're calling for nominations. The order in which the nominations are made is generally the order in which you call the vote. There is an option to call the vote per name and do a voice vote if that's provided for, but that's generally the exception. So the chairperson will call for nominations. If you have one, if you have two, you'll go in order. So for example, I nominate Ken for chairperson, someone else nominates Bill for chairperson, and then as the chairperson at the time, you'll be presiding and you say, is there any other nominations? If not, I'm going to close these. Now you can take a motion on that if you want, motion to close the nominations. It's not required, but you can do it. So at that point, you would call the vote as to the chairperson. Generally, it would be who's nominated first. So if Mr. Napier is nominated first, then you would call a motion on that. If it passes, then you're the chairperson. If it fails, then you move to the second nominee. Does that clear things up? So then, okay. Now, generally, it's, preferred that we act cordially to one another. We're all grown-ups. The more we act, cordially with each other, the more business we're going to get done. Being polite, requesting permission to speak, you guys don't have buttons that, some places have buttons that you can say, I want to speak. Like we talked about earlier, you'll put the business to a motion, and then you'll just have a second, and then you'll discuss it. If somebody wants to amend it, they ask the chairperson, Mr. Chairperson, can I amend my motion, please? And then that's a way to bring the motion back, restate it. It's good to limit the number of minutes you talk on each topic. That way you can get more public business done. You're here to represent the city, going through the budget matters. Sometimes you'll serve on other committees as well, and these things will, come in handy. You don't want to have certain people get more time than others, and that's why we establish these limits. We also want you to recognize, public comment is heard based on Florida law. Anything that's going to be decided by the public has, or in the public interest, you would have to let them talk as well. So that's just the basics on parliamentary procedure. I've given you Robert's Rules cheat sheet. I've also given you a blown-up version of it, because I know I'm getting blind. But there's also a more in-depth version that should help you out if you ever get in a pickle on procedure. So I think that covers basically on parliamentary procedure and Robert's Rules at this point, if you guys want to ask me any questions about that.
I have one small one. When you were talking about the vote, I noticed you said, all right, so for instance, you would say, okay, Ken's name and who all would want to vote for him, and then maybe Bill's name and who would want to vote for him. I noticed on the city council, when they go across, like, one would say who they want, and the next one would
And that would be a voice vote.
So that's a
So
voice vote?
yeah, that's a voice vote. If procedurally they're accustomed to doing it that way,
Okay.
you can do it that way.
Okay, so either way is fine.
Correct.
Gotcha.
So I have a question on the same subject. I follow the city council, and that's exactly what they do. And if you make a motion to elect one person, and then you vote on it immediately, you've shut off the opportunity to nominate anybody else. That's why you do the nominations first, am I correct?
Well, it's not a motion. You're calling, when he opens up the floor for chairperson election, essentially, you're calling for nominations. It's kind of like going on the ballot to be voted on. You're not making a motion to put Ken as the chairperson. You should be nominating him to be considered by the body, and then it's elected, essentially.
So that's how you get the opportunity to nominate a second person if somebody wants to.
Right, because until the nominations are closed, everybody is open to be nominated.
And you can't shut off the vote for that particular office
He
if you haven't allowed all the nominations to be made.
Well, there shouldn't be any motions, it should be nominations. So the chairperson should be open to nominations until everybody's done nominating.
Thank you.
The agenda says selection of a chairperson. It doesn't say open up for nominations. It says selection of a chairperson, and there was a motion made and it was duly seconded. I don't know why we keep rehashing this. That's exactly what happened.
Sir, I'm not here to debate with you what happened. What I'm telling you
Why
is,
doesn't this agenda say call for nominations for chairperson?
because
I don't make up this agenda.
Sir, as I've stated just a bit ago, those topics on your agenda are made by the clerk. They're not an in-depth description of everything that should happen underneath there. That's just a synopsis, and it says selection of chairperson, and that's the basic topic of what you all do during that.
Jennifer, on the same subject, at the beginning of most of the meetings, including the city council meetings, one of the first things that the chairman or the mayor does is, are there any changes to the agenda before we start the meeting?
And that's generally substantive changes, though, not rewording,
Right, okay.
like moving items, around or removing something from consent. But just like when I write a contract, the beginning of that paragraph, the wording may change from time to time, and that's not like binding me in stone. I could change the wording, you know what I'm saying? And there's usually a paragraph in contracts as well that says, these things can mean different things and aren't binding. Like, that's the basic topic of what you're doing. Could a different word be used? But that doesn't make it the subject any different. The point is you were selecting a chairperson. The methodology by which you got there should have been nominations and then closing the nominations and electing a chairperson. Whether you call it, I motion to, it shouldn't be I motion to make somebody up for election to be a chairperson. It should be, who wants to be a chairperson? I nominate Bill, I nominate Bruce, I nominate Larry, Mr. Napier, Mr. Hoffman. However, that's generally how it should be done according to Robert's rules. So any other questions on parliamentary procedure?
But what he said, the city council can add things on the agenda, but we can't. We can't change this agenda, is that correct?
Who sets the agenda?
I don't believe we have authority to change the agenda.
Well, city council has certain, you all are a designated committee of the city council to handle business as assigned. That may be the difference there.
Yeah.
City council doesn't generally add items because they have to be noticed and published and noticed to the public in the newspaper. Ordinances have, advertising requirements. Only emergency agenda items are added.
Can we put that as a question for you? I'm not sure who creates the agenda for this committee, but I think it's Ken. And Ken has a choice of what he puts on the agenda, but I also think that we could change it, but I would like to find out if that's true.
You might be able to change the order, but I don't think you have a lot of ability legally to take up topics you're not designated. You all are a designated committee, a dependent committee of the city council.
Okay.
With limited duties.
Jennifer, I would have a question then. If a committee member has a topic that they would like to have on a future agenda, is it appropriate for them to notify me as the preparer?
Well, they can ask you, and then you can look into whether it's something within their scope and it's appropriate to bring back to them.
Yeah, and it may be I would tell that committee member that, no, this is not appropriate, or, I would...
Well, we generally ask for that, like at this meeting, if we wanted something on the next agenda, we would mention it here at this meeting to have it on the agenda so we could discuss it.
But
But once that agenda's set,
as your staff...
I've not seen where we have authority to change it.
Well, as your staff liaison, I have a responsibility too to kind of keep everybody on track. And I think I would argue with you if you wanted to talk about a certain pothole on a certain roadway. That's
It's somebody else's job.
That gets you out of the realm of what we would hope you're looking at as a policy review board.
Different boards, different topics, right? I hear there's a planning board opening. No, I don't know that there's an opening, I just, some reappointment or something. So everybody's got different jobs, right? We got a budget board, a planning board, a veterans board, a natural resources board, and that's something else I'll talk about too, once we get there. But I just want to make sure we're all good on parliamentary procedure and Robert's rules. If you ever need guidance, you know, Ken can get me on the phone lickety-split if I'm not here. And, you know, this reference guide is very handy.
Is there any other questions about the, training session here?
So, I've also included ethics and law in here. You know, you all get this when you first start out. Just basically hit some of the topics, you know, don't take gifts, please. Don't take, you know, don't do something outside of the sunshine. Don't have meetings that aren't recorded, noticed, and public. Those are the basics. Keep records. If you're taking notes, turn them in. If you're sending an email about public business, it has to be turned in. Text messages count, emails count, social media counts, anything you're doing that you're talking about public business that might come before you. Don't talk to each other during the meeting, off the microphone. These are all just basic kind of things, but we forget sometimes. The Sunshine Law in Florida is very broad. Just please be careful as board members. Make sure you turn in your financial forms if they ask for one from you. Jeanette needs a form from you. She's going to hunt you down if you don't turn it in. And there can be consequences if you violate the Sunshine Law, the Public Records Act, as we know, up to and including criminal penalties. I know you all don't want to incur that due to a volunteer position. The reason we do that is because you represent the public. We want you to make fair and impartial decisions. If you've got a conflict, you have to disclose it. If you can't be fair and impartial, you have to abstain from voting. Those are generally the only occasions in which you would abstain from voting. You have an obligation, once you're appointed to the board, to vote on the matter unless you have an economic interest that's personal to you, or you're so fair, you can't be so impartial that you vote on the matter. Generally, that's not going to happen unless you're living next door to a development project. And even then, it's, you know, sometimes suspect as to whether or not you have to vote. Does anybody have any questions about public records or sunshine law?
I have one.
Okay.
And it's never come up before until recently when we were, when you were talking about social media during the council meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
I am partners with another woman on a Facebook page, and I know that Mr. McGinn has one as well. When the agendas come out, because I get text alerts for the agendas for all of planning and zoning, city council, budget, you know, parks and recreation, all of them, in an effort to hopefully get the community to where they'll either come or listen or tune in, anything, we will share those to our Facebook page, just the agenda. You know, attached is the agenda for the 3-4 budget committee meeting. It doesn't say, come join, listen in, or anything. We just post them. Is there a problem with that?
No, anybody can share that. Just don't have a public conversation.
So if we turn comments off, we're good?
Once you've got well, as long as you've not opened it up to the public, you have to be careful once you become sort of a public figure and you open up your page as, so if I had a page and I had so I'm city attorney, right? Mine is turned off. But if I had it public and I talked about city business on there, shared the agenda and had my opinions on there as to what I thought was on the agenda, that's going to be public record.
Oh, yeah, we don't, we just post the agenda and we move on.
Right.
And in fact, I don't even think I've ever seen any comments on it.
Right, no.
Except, thank you.
Right, yeah, no. As long as you're not having conversation about public business, then it's not public record. It has to be intended to perpetuate public business.
Okay. That raises an addendum to that question, which is, if you're having a conversation about something that you were not on a committee for, or generally known in the community, is that acceptable?
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
I'll give you an example. There's a hotel being built, and you are advocating and trying to provide activation to get the public out.
Okay, I got you. As
Okay.
long as you're not saying, I'm a member of the budget committee and I'm against this hotel.
Okay.
And I'll talk about that in a couple minutes once we get past ethics. So the other thing is ex parte communications. If you have them, they're presumed, they're presumed prejudicial. You can disclose it before the meeting, but you should always disclose ex parte communications, conflicts, and site visits. More likely that's relevant on planning board and other boards, but if you're talking to people about the budget or things of that nature before you're making a recommendation, you should be disclosing that. Let me see if there's anything else in ethics. You all are a quasi-legislative, I would say board, not quasi-judicial. Quasi-judicial is more planning board, board of adjustment, things of that nature. You're more of a formulating policy, so you wouldn't have cross-examinations of witnesses or things of that nature. So I think I'm going to wrap up on ethics and law unless anybody has any questions. I'm always available, jcockcroft@cityofsebastian.org. Feel free to reach out anytime if you have any questions on any of this stuff, okay? So then, hot topics I want to talk about, and these are just the main things. We don't accept gifts. We don't ask for money to vote a certain way. I kind of read this to City Council. I'm going to do it here too. If you don't like it, I'm sorry. It's kind of corny. So, just because you're on a board doesn't mean you're entitled to gifts. It doesn't mean you can steal. It doesn't mean your kids should get jobs. It doesn't mean you should bully your friends. Be nice to your fellow council members. You get more accomplished that way. It doesn't make you an expert. I'm going to touch back on that. It doesn't let you have secret meetings with your friends. It doesn't mean you can hide your business. So, just because you're on a board, it doesn't make you special. It just means that you're an amazing volunteer, but we still have to follow the rules. So, one of the things you mentioned was talking about your opposition to a hotel. So, one of the things you guys need to be careful about is keeping in mind that just because you're on a board, that doesn't mean that you're delegated to go talk to another board and say, I represent this board. It doesn't make you an expert in budget just because you're on the budget board. If you're on the planning board, it doesn't make you an expert in planning. You're just a volunteer in planning, and you happen to have some experience in hearing those things. I'm not an expert in budgeting because I'm here or come to a meeting sometimes. I certainly am not. So, that being said, you act as a body. You don't act individually unless the body says, Mr. McGinn, I want you to go to City Council and tell them this is why we talked about this and what we decided. The minutes should reflect what was decided. The video will reflect what was decided. So that's what that means. Don't have secret meetings. We know what that's about. We don't take votes. We don't take gifts for votes. I mean, it's all basic stuff. You guys know this. You've been doing this a while. But I think those were the hot topics, sort of. And with that, I think I'm done unless somebody has some more questions.
Well, I have a comment because I heard the word public. What was it you said? Public's business.
Did I say Publix? I meant public.
The thing that's covered by the Sunshine Law for this budget committee are things that would reasonably come in front of us as this budget committee, not the public in general. We are only responsible under the Sunshine Law for what will come in front of us as the budget committee. It may be something to do with another committee that would never, ever come in front of us. We're not, you understand what I'm saying? We're not prohibited from talking about the city's business in general, only what would reasonably
Right,
come in front of us as the budget committee.
Yep, that's what I just explained to him.
I mean, that's correct, right? We're only responsible for what may come in front of us as a budget
Yeah,
committee.
you shouldn't be going out and talking to Mr. Hoffman about the budget and how you're planning to vote on something.
Well, I understand that.
That's what that
Something would
means.
reasonably come before us.
Correct,
But if I were talking to him about a zoning issue, it has nothing to do with this.
correct.
But when you say the public
Your
in
public
general,
business.
that's a very broad topic. And I don't believe we're restricted that broadly.
I didn't say you were.
Well, you said the public's business.
Right, your public business relates to budgeting.
Our public's business is only related to the budget.
Correct.
Jennifer, on that same subject, if this information is published on the Sebastian City website and it's available to everybody and it's not just within this committee, then it's public knowledge, so you can
Public
discuss
record.
it. Right.
Public record, right.
You could
But
discuss
as
it.
committee members, you are not supposed to talk about it with each other outside of a public forum,
Right.
because you make decisions when you come here.
That's between us.
Correct.
Doesn't mean I can't talk to my neighbor who has nothing to do with the city council.
That may be an ex parte communication.
Well, it's only each other. It's us.
Only if it's gonna affect the vote, and then you're supposed to say, I've had ex parte communication.
Correct.
All right. Which the city council does with almost every vote they have.
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm available anytime. Just let me know. That's all I have.
Are there any other questions? Okay, the next item on the agenda is the next meeting date is Monday, May the 13th, 2024.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to request I lost my train of thought there, sorry. An authorized absence on that date. I'll be traveling back from Europe.
Okay, no problem. So you will be out of town on the May 13th meeting? Not a problem.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I will be traveling and probably in Pennsylvania, but I will attend by Zoom.
Oh, okay. Then you will be here.
By
You will
Zoom,
be present.
right. I'm just letting you know I'll be on Zoom.
Okay,
All right.
thank you. Grace, you got something to say?
As far as I know, I'll be here.
Okay. Next thing on the agenda, any other thing for the good of the order? This meeting is adjourned.